Yep. I teach English, which none of you teach, so hang in there with me for like 15 minutes, okay? I've been teaching freshman composition at Cal State San Marcos for about 8 years, and as I was explaining to a couple of other folks earlier, when our program first started, we had a very small school and a very small program, and we had a lot of support for our students. They had to go to the Writing Center 16 times a semester. We had very few English language teachers. We had very few international students, and as enrollment has increased, all of that's changed. And when I say all that's changed, we don't have any remedial courses for English, and we don't offer a lot of Writing Center support anymore, so they only have to go twice in the semester. And we've increased substantially how many international students we have, and I would say at least 50 to 70% of my students are English language learners. Couple that with the fact that their English placement exam means nothing at our campus because we have one freshman writing class. So like I explained, they either come in very low level, very high level, somewhere in the middle, and we're trying to teach all of them. So about 3 semesters ago, I was teaching one class that was just horrific. It was horrific in every way possible. So I had 4 classes at the time. This one class, no matter what I did, no matter what I said, they were having so much trouble conceptualizing anything. And I couldn't figure out why. The demographic for that class was 9 people absolutely struggling no matter what I said, like would rather sit there and curl each other's hair in class. I'm not even kidding you. Like someone brought a curling iron to class. That was a new low. The other half of the class were like the best students you could ever imagine. And I felt bad because I'm trying to handle curling irons, like on one hand, right? And then on the other hand, keep the really high-level students challenged. Turns out the majority of the high-level students were international students from Holland. They were great, just great. Turns out, and I found this out later, and we have now changed things because I had such an issue with it that semester, the 9 students that were struggling were former foster youth. No one sent any kind of notification to me, or I could have intervened maybe earlier. They didn't self-identify. It's not a question that I would typically think to ask every single student in the class. So after this semester and realizing I can't possibly come in and teach everybody's needs and do the exact same activity and expect everybody to catch up in an hour and 15-minute class that meets twice a week, I started looking for alternatives, and I took a 1-week professional development class on flipping. I use Writer's Help, which uses Launchpad, so that's going to be a little bit different for you guys. So think of the Launchpad as we're going through this. Writer's Help, you know, pretty much everything I've put up here is going to work with Launchpad. So Flip Course, obviously, as you guys know, is a flip class that, you know, you're digitalizing everything. I really didn't record myself. I used a lot of YouTube videos that already, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel here. There was a lot of good stuff on there, and I used a lot of things from Writer's Help. So I assigned it as my only composition text in my 4 sections. I have 20 students per. My director allowed me to pilot this. Nobody else was going to do this. So I don't really have any samples to look at from other classes. I was the only instructor who was allowed to do it. So I did it for fall and spring. They completed exercises, readings, tutorials, and learning curve quizzes as homework. And then I used this in Moodle as best I could because we know it's not, Writer's Help isn't integrated in Moodle in any way. And then I paired this sometimes with TED Ed lessons. So in a composition class, this is sort of what this looked like. So a sample homework assignment had students watch a video on how to write a thesis statement, then look at several thesis samples and complete a short exercise or quiz on thesis statements. Then I would take the class period that I earned, essentially from doing all this. This is what I used to do in the traditional class. The next class, then I had them write the thesis statement in the class because that's actually the next hard step. In the traditional class, they would be doing this as homework, and I wouldn't be there to see if it was good until I saw it in a first draft. And by the time I saw a first draft, they've already got 3 to 5 pages written, and God forbid I have to say those 3 pages are not good, right? So by flipping this, it allowed me to intervene a lot earlier. By them doing this at home, for those 9 students that didn't have those great study skills or conceptualization skills, they were able to go back over the work again and again as many times as they needed to before they came into class. For my students from Holland, they watched it once. They did the quiz once. They came in and they were ready to go, right? So this is kind of like what a unit would look like, right? A lot of you have already done this. You just go in, you know. All of these were really low stakes, but I obviously have to incentivize things because if we don't, then they're not going to do them. So they got excited. My class is out of 1,000 points. 5 points isn't sinking anybody's ship, but they don't do that because they won't know that because they don't do the math, right? These are my actual students. They were so happy that day, so I asked them if I could take their picture and tweet it on my unsuccessful Twitter account. So in class, I would briefly review the material and then jump right into the more difficult task of drafting. It depends on the day. I would group them up. I would do it individually, but I don't lecture anymore. Flat out, I've taken the lecture out. So I talk for 10 minutes, I facilitate. I talk for 10 more minutes, I facilitate. But the class has become a lab, and so I bought a lot of these. You know, I've got a lot of index cards, notepads, you name it, but this really helped me develop a lot of community in my class as well. So I was walking around and actively providing feedback on the draft, and I wouldn't let anybody leave until they got a green light with, you know, their thesis. For some people, that happened in 10 minutes. They came to class, and it was an amazing thesis, and I said, awesome. Now write a topic sentence. Now write the next 5 topic sentences. So they had something to do. Some people took 11 times of me walking over to their desk, and they still had to leave going, I hope that's okay, and me following up saying, I'm on office hours, you know, 2 hours from now. Come see me, and we'll work this out. I also did TED Ed, which in the interest of time, I won't play my little video, but TED Ed's kind of cool. I've customized that too, so I'll play them a short video. 4 minutes usually is kind of my max. Shows them how to do something like maybe write a thesis, right? Then they go to the next step where it's giving them model thesis statements, and then the third step usually takes them to an assignment of some sort, some very brief assignment like a free write. So why did I use this instead of a paper text? There were some things I had to sacrifice in the paper text. I won't lie, it's nice sometimes to be able to write in a paper text in class. So I might pair this with something smaller this coming semester. But I found that Writer's Help in general more effectively met the diverse needs. So students with different learning styles, we all know this. Obviously students have, you know, they're visual learners, auditory learners, et cetera. It meets all of that. I found that for my English language learners and my international students, that being able to go back to it, slow it down, helped tremendously. I could go into and see, again, how much time somebody was spending on something. And, of course, there were the outliers of the 700 minutes. But for the most part, you know, I could look and see, oh, you know what, this English language learner, who I know is struggling in class, it just took her 3 hours to get through this particular exercise versus my international student from Holland, it only took her 24 minutes, you know. So it really helped me to better understand where they were coming from. This is something I've struggled with a lot with my students recently. I've had a lot of students on the autism spectrum. I'm sure a lot of you have. For writing, that can be interesting because they're just processing things differently. Not at Cal State, but I also teach at a community college. I have a high veteran population, and so I've taught a lot of students in the last few years with traumatic brain injuries, and they're just, you know, they're just assessing things differently. They're processing things sometimes a little bit more slowly. And so by using this, it is multimodal, that wonderful word we love in English, right? It gives them multiple different ways they can encounter the information. And if they don't like it or it doesn't stick, it's not just me regurgitating some analogy again and again or a new analogy. They can go find more resources. So what ended up happening was I was able to reach those folks that were at the bottom, the curling irons, right? And I was able to reach the higher up students all at the same time before they even got into class. So one of the feedback comments I got was when I didn't understand the first reading, I did an interactive exercise and then read it again, and it all made sense then because I was able to see if I was understanding what I was reading. That was the biggest thing students came back to me with is, I'm so glad when I came into class I actually knew what I was talking about. They were always stressed about that, like, am I going to say something stupid? Is everyone going to think I'm giving the wrong answer? Just by having them go through this, they would go and find resources I hadn't assigned simply because they wanted to make sure they got it before they walked into class, because they knew in class, I'm not going to just stand there and lecture, I'm going to put them into the groups, and they really do have to be responsible for knowing it. There's just simply more resources in Writer's Help. One downside of a paper text at the 100 level for composition text is that they just don't cover grammar. They sort of, if they do, they touch on it very briefly, and most of the time they don't. You know, 60% of my students come in, they can't write at the college level. So they have significant grammar issues, especially if they're English language learners, right? So I need that grammar substitute. So I said it has extensive grammar resources for students, including all the diagnostics, et cetera. So kind of like what you were saying, Alex, earlier about, you know, giving sort of that pre-test, using this as a sidecar to come up with an individual plan for students. I can use this, okay? So the flipping benefits for me were so amazing. I wish I had done this years earlier. It does emphasize the student-centered learning. I'm saying, I know you have an issue with this. I know you don't. Let's tailor some things to you. And I'm getting more people across the finish line with grades they want. I was getting people across the finish line, but not in a way that I felt comfortable still sending them on to higher level writing classes. I could say, yes, you have a C. Yes, you barely squeak by with the C. But with no other writing classes that they have to take after mine, I don't feel like I'm doing them any service by passing them with that low C, even if that's passing. So this really tailors to them. Big thing in English, modeling that writing process, showing them it takes a lot of draft. They don't get that in high school. They just don't have the time in high school to give it to them. So, and I work a lot with high school instructors. We do a lot of collaborations and trying to figure out what does college ready mean? And in high school, they just simply don't have the time to typically let them write more than 2 drafts. I spent 8 weeks on their major paper. They turn in 18 pages to me at the end of their freshman semester, but it takes them 8 weeks in that paper. They probably draft 11 times for that. And they get to the end, and of course they want to just die because they're tired of seeing this paper and they hate me, right? But these are great papers from the students that at the beginning you would have just sort of wondered, how are you understanding anything that you're reading? How is anyone else going to understand what you're writing? In-class feedback reduces the take-home work. This is huge for a writing instructor. I do have small classes, but I have a lot of reading. So, you know, I can have 400 to 800 pages of reading I've got to get back to somebody within 7 to 10 days. So, no, I don't have those 600 student classes, thank heavens, right? But I have a lot of pages I've got to read and give pretty substantial feedback on if I want them to improve. If I do this in class, I'm in the middle of the process with them, and I think that's really important because I can say, I know you're having an issue now, here, help with that, and then they go and do it rather than giving it back to them 3 days later, right? And then obviously the auto-scored homework, again, it saves more grading time. I found that the flipping is genuinely giving them better feedback more often, and I'm doing less work, plain and simple. So here's the difference I saw. In my traditional class, out of, say, 28 days in an entire semester or meetings that I would have with them, I typically lectured 6 to 8 full lecture days, which I really hated because I know research shows that is ineffective, but that's still where I was at. And that's actually still a lot less than many of my colleagues. I would have one individual conference with students for their major essay and only their major essay for one draft of it. And then the students obviously always sell back their book because it was their English book and they don't need it anymore. Flip class, I don't have any lecture days anymore. Everything is a workshop day, plain and simple. I will not lecture, I refuse. Individual conferences are now with every student for every writing assignment. That has been the most substantial change. It has made a huge difference. By getting rid of these lecture days, I've changed peer revision days. Now instead of 1 day, I do 2 days. And during those 2 days, while they're doing their thing with their first draft, I'll call half of the students up and individually conference with them that day. The next day that they come, they have to bring a new draft. They conference with each other again. I call up the second half of the class. I do it with every writing assignment. So now they're getting 2 levels of feedback for every single paper. That also equalizes the feedback for those lower students who I know are not going to ask for help or don't know to ask for help. And it helps those higher up students who really need to be challenged. Now, I can have curling irons going on, right, in the class, heaven forbid, but I can still address those students that walk into my class as already A writers. I want them to remain A writers, but I also want them to remain engaged and still like writing. And I've lost a lot of them in the past because I've been having to teach to the bottom. This ends up equalizing the feedback for everybody. And then obviously they're not selling their book back. I found that the more that I use this, the more they want to use it, and so they're actually continuing to use it even into their other classes. I did have a few pitfalls, so if I didn't touch back to this, they just reamed me in my evaluation. So I had to make sure in every single class I would touch back and say, remember what you did in Writer's Help. Sign into it in the classroom. Make sure that they knew it was not busy work I had assigned, so that, I don't remember who said it, they didn't think I wasn't teaching right or doing my job. I also have small classes, and that's the risk I run. If I just assign stuff and then come in and without using those buzzwords or signing into it, they'll just sort of assume, well, she had us do all this stuff, it's all for points, but I hate Writer's Help because you're not using it. The next one was, and many people have already said this, when sort of jumping between things. Moodle, for example, I might have an exam in Moodle and I need them to also do something in Writer's Help, or they need to do a reading in a novel and then do something in Writer's Help. They got really upset if I didn't remind them a lot. So I had a Moodle reminder, I had a Twitter reminder, I had an email reminder, and I had me in front of them reminder. You know what, when you guys showed us the mobile thing earlier, yeah, I'll take it, because right now, short of waking up next to them and saying you have something today, I feel like I've exhausted my reminders. I don't know where to go from here. Yeah, I'm trying to go the extra mile, but I'm running out of miles right now. And then the last thing is the text goes down, and that is one thing about Writer's Help that I found, that it goes down periodically, and when it does, I just get flooded with emails. I've got a lot of stuff in there, and people panic, and they immediately email me, and this is down, and you know, I think we're going to run into that with absolutely any platform. Again, it's a matter of how you sell it and knowing about it, but that is one thing I don't think I anticipated when I fully flipped. And it happened 2 weeks in a row. Something happened. I had like 40 emails one Monday, and the next Tuesday another 40, and I was just a little over it. It also led to a negative perception of me and the flipped class, which I didn't like. So again, we have to make that differentiation for our students, that the technology is not me, right? And you know, what you're in control of or not. I think that is everything. So thanks for listening.